Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia announced he's reached an expansive agreement with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on health care costs, energy, and climate issues, taxing higher earners and large corporations, and reducing the federal debt. Manchin and Schumer said the measure would raise $739 billion over 10 years in revenue, the biggest chunk coming from a 15% corporate minimum tax. Schumer and Manchin said the Senate will consider the legislation next week, presumably under so-called budget reconciliation rules that would allow passage by a simple majority in the evenly divided Senate, with Vice President Kamala Harris casting the tie-breaking vote. Mary Sherman has more.
This is something we've waited for a very long time.
More than a year after negotiations began, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Joe Manchin struck an energy and health care deal, part of a budget reconciliation package Democrats plan to pass on a party line vote. It invests $369 billion in energy climate programs, $300 billion to reduce the deficit, lowers prescription drug prices, and extends health care subsidies. And it faces opposition from Republicans, including Senator Joni Ernst, who blamed historically high inflation on Democratic spending proposals.
Bidenomics is driving up the cost of everything, and the Democrats' solution is to spend even more of your hard-earned money.
The legislation would be paid for by a 15% corporate minimum tax, savings from empowering Medicaid to negotiate lower drug prices, and closing tax loopholes. I'm Mary Sherman for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
Environmental groups and progressive lawmakers doubled down on their call for President Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency Wednesday. Eileen Alfandary has more.
New Mexico's Melanie Stansberry said rivers in the West are running dry.
We can't wait. Our planet cannot wait. Our communities cannot wait. And the ecosystems on which we depend cannot wait.
Hundreds of millions in the country are facing deadly heat waves. Jean Sue is with the Center for Biological Diversity and helped author a report that spelled out the powers that Biden could invoke with a climate emergency declaration.
That means unlocking military funds to actually go towards reconstruction of our system so that it is renewable and just and distributed. And what it also does is stop the hundreds of billions of dollars every year that leave from BlackRock and other financial institutions here towards coal, oil, and gas projects abroad, poisoning people there. Those are things that he all can do with the stroke of his pen with a climate emergency declaration.
An emergency declaration also could spur domestic industry to manufacture renewable energy and clean transportation technologies. I'm Eileen Alfandary for Pacifica Radio.
The Federal Reserve raised its benchmark interest rate by a hefty 0.75 of a point Wednesday for a second straight time in its most aggressive drive in 3 decades to tame high inflation. The decision follows a jump in inflation to 9%, the fastest annual rate in 41 years. Raising borrowing rates will make it costlier to take out a mortgage or an auto or business loan. Consumers and businesses then presumably borrow and spend less, cooling the economy and slowing inflation. But critics like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren say the Fed is taking a short-sighted approach that could lead to a recession, noting there are multiple factors leading to global inflation out of Federal Chair Jerome Powell's control.
He also cannot control supply chain kinks. He also cannot control COVID outbreaks. He also cannot control price gouging by companies with market dominance. My only point is, before he engages in yet another round of historic rate increases, that we think of this as an all-of-the-above approach. Jerome Powell can't fix everything, but if he uses his one tool very aggressively, he runs the risk of having the Fed push our economy into a recession. And I think that's a risk we should not take.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said he expects the Fed to continue to increase interest rates to 3% over the course of the year. A House investigation has found that gun manufacturers have taken in more than $1 billion from selling AR-15-style guns over the past decade. The report said the weapons are marketed to young men as a sign of manhood. Sales have been rising. The AR-15 has also been used in recent mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, Uvalde, Texas, and Highland Park, Illinois. Christopher Martinez reports.
Gun industry executives testified before Congress for the first time in nearly 2 decades Wednesday at a hearing titled Examining the Practice and Profits of Gun Manufacturers. Witnesses included executives from 2 large gun manufacturers, while a third refused to attend. Christopher Killoy is president and CEO of Stern Ruger & Company. The chair of the House Oversight Committee, Democrat Carolyn Maloney of New York, questioned him about Stern Ruger's marketing practices.
How many more American children need to die before your company will stop selling assault weapons to civilians and children, the weapon of choice in most mass murders in our country?
Congresswoman Maloney, I believe that these murders are local problems that have to be solved locally.
She asked both executives whether they would apologize to victims of mass shootings using their products. Killoy declined.
To blame the firearm, the particular firearm in use here that we're talking about, modern sporting rifles,
Thank you.
to blame the firearm as an inanimate object.
Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
Ukraine is celebrating its statehood today, and Russia launched 25 rocket strikes from Belarus on Ukraine's capital, Kiev, and northern Chernihiv. At least 5 people are dead and 25 injured, say Ukrainian officials. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.